background. The setting of this story is in the catacombs. Much of the action in this story takes place in catacombs, which are underground tunnels that house tombs, in other words, dead bodies. These long, often complex passageways stretch out like cities of the dead. In past centuries, some wealthy European families held funerals in catacombs beneath the family manor. The dead were laid to rest, surrounded by the bones of their ancestors. Edgar Allan Poe lived from 1809 to 1849, so he died when he was only 40 years old. One of the first great American storytellers, Edgar Allan Poe, made the most of a short, tragic life. Orphaned at the age of 3, Poe was raised by foster parents, the Allens, from whom he took his middle name. The Allens were good to Poe, and they gave him an education. But he had to leave college when his foster father refused to pay Poe's gambling debts. Poe found some happiness when he married Virginia Clem. Her death from tuberculosis in 1847 caused Poe to become increasingly antisocial. In 1849, he was discovered in a delirious condition on a Baltimore street, and 3 days later, he was dead. Okay, so we've got a protagonist. Remember, the protagonist is the main character. A lot of times we'll say the protagonist is the good guy and the antagonist is the bad guy. But just because someone's the main character and the protagonist doesn't mean he's actually a good guy. And this is Edgar Allan Poe, so we know that he's got lots of bad guys who are his main characters. The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length, I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled. But the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. A lot of words there. If we look at the footnotes, we can see that impunity means freedom from consequences. So if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, if you do it with impunity, it means you get away with it and you don't get punished. So he says, the 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had dealt with as best I could, but when he insulted me, that was the end of the line. So this whole thing says that some guy named Fortunato insulted our protagonist, and that he is going to get even with him, and he's not going to get caught getting even with him, but Fortunato is going to know that he was the one who got even with him. So he's going to get him, but he's not going to get in trouble for getting him. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have a true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmary, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely wherever I could. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of carnival season that I encountered my friend.
Oh, time out. The supreme madness of carnival season? What's that?
The church wisely adapted the pagan seasonal calendar to fit the story it wanted to tell. It rebranded this winter season of scarcity as a time of purification for Christians and called it Lent. But before the deprivation of Lent, there was a rowdy period of anything goes. And this hedonistic fling is Carnival. The best-known carnival celebration in Europe is in Venice. Each winter, Carnival casts a spell on Venetians and visitors alike. Following a tradition that originated in the 13th century, the city slips behind a mask of anonymity as Venetians promenade, pose, and pretend to be someone they're not. Authority is challenged, rules are broken. The goal? To indulge in all the pleasures that will be forbidden in Lent.
Okay, so the most important thing to know about this time of year is it's right before Lent, which is the time when people have to give up everything they love, like meat and alcohol and sweets. And so basically they're trying to get all that out of their system with crazy partying and drinking and these crazy costumes, and it's a lot of confusion and energy, and it's a good time to possibly get revenge on somebody. Okay, time in, back to the story.
It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he'd been drinking much. The man wore motley. If we go to the footnotes, motley is a clown's multicolored costume. The man wore motley. This is my rendition of him wearing motley. Basically looks like one of those court gestures from the medieval times. He had on a tight-fitting party stripe dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of carnival?" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado," he said. "I have my doubts." "Amontillado?" "And I must satisfy them." "Amontillado." "As you are engaged, I'm on my way to Lucchese. If anyone has a critical turn, he will tell me. Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own." "Come, let us go." "Whither?" "To your vault." "My friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchese." "I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with niter." "Let us go nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing." "Amontillado, you have been imposed upon. As for Lucchese, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado." Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, and putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. What he's describing there is how he is dressed. Here's our main character, and he is in costume also, and his costume is kind of like a Zorro-looking costume. He's got a black mask, he's got a high-collared cloak, he's wearing a hat. Basically, he's hard to identify. Like, if you saw him, you'd be like, "Who is that? I don't know who that is." I couldn't really see his face. So now the two of them are headed to our main character, his name, by the way, is Montresor. They're headed to his vault, to his catacombs, to his basement, basically, to try the wine. See, they always kept their wine in the basement because you don't want your wine to get wrecked. So you keep it in the basement where it stays the right temperature. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I told them that I should not return until morning and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent and stood together upon the damp ground of the catacombs of Montresor. One sec, I want to show you a picture if I can. So here's where they are. They're downstairs, basically, in his catacombs, which are actually these winding tunnels where they had to put their deceased relatives because there wasn't, Europe doesn't have a ton of space, especially Italy, just a little boot. So they had to make do. So they just kept digging farther and farther down underground for hundreds of years, putting their dead bodies underground. Okay. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. Why do you think Fortunato's walking is unsteady? Look at him. Dude is drunk. So that's why he's like, oh. The pint, he said. It's farther on, said I. But observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls. He turned towards me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. Nitre? He said at length. Nitre, I replied. How long have you had that cough? My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. It is nothing, he said at last. Come, I said with decision, we will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as I once was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchese. Enough, he said. The cough is near nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough. True, I replied, and indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this medoc will defend us from the damps. And so Montresor hands Fortunato a little of this. This is, he says, this will make your cough feel better. Go, 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 go. What do you think he's doing that for? Why would he be giving him that? Maybe to keep him drunk? Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly while his bells jingled. I drink, he said, to the buried that repose around us, and to your long life. He again took my arm, and we proceeded. These vaults, he said, are extensive. The Montresors, I replied, were a great numerous family. But I forgot your arms. A human foot, d'or, in a field d'azur. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel. And the motto? Nemo me impune lacesis. Good, he said. So he said, obviously when you're a rich family, in Europe especially, you might have some nobility or there's something where you are identified by a certain symbol as your family. So he says, Montresor says, this is what my family seal looks like. It basically looks like a foot squelching down a snake, and that snake is biting back. And it says, in Latin, nemo me impune lecicist. I don't know how to say it. But that translates to, no one harms me unpunished. So that's sort of interesting. I would say this might be an example of verbal irony, because he says to Fortunato, hey, our symbol and our family motto is no one gets away with hurting us. And Fortunato ironically responds by saying, oh, no one harms your family without being punished? Good. Not realizing he's about to get the smack down of his life. So there it is. Go, 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 go. Take a drink. Okay. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We'd passed through long walls of piled skeletons with casks and puncheons intermingling into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by the arm above the elbow. The niter, I said. See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we go back ere it is too late. Your call. It is nothing, he said. Let us go on. But first, another draught of Medoc. Go, 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 go. I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it out of breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed, and he threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation that I did not understand. Wah! Maybe something like this. Wah! I don't know what he did. Threw him a sign. I looked at him in surprise, and he repeated the movement, a grotesque one. Wah! You do not comprehend, he said. Not I replied. Then you are not of the Brotherhood. How? You are not of the Masons. If we look at the footnote, Masons were the Freemasons is what their name was. It was an international secret society. Yeah, yes, I said. Yes. You, impossible. A Mason? A Mason, I replied. A sign, he said, a sign. It is this, I answered, producing from beneath the folds of my roquelaire a trowel. So, Fortunato's in a fraternity of men. Ha ha ha, I'm a Mason and you're not. And Montresor says, oh, no, I'm a Mason too. And he goes, show me a sign that you're a Mason. And so Montresor pulls one of these tools out from underneath his cape. A trowel. And he says, you jest, he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces, but let us proceed to the Amontillado. Now, let's just clarify what this is. This is the tool that a bricklayer uses to put the cement or the grout in between the bricks. A person who is a bricklayer is said to work in masonry. They are a mason. So when he says he's a mason, he's playing with the words. He's saying, oh yeah, I'm a mason too. And he says, I lay bricks. Now, you would think that this guy would be like, what you got that for? What you got that tool for? But he's a little drunk, so he's not putting two and two together at all. He's like, whatever, just show me the Amontillado. Be it so, I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak again, and offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeau rather to glow than to flame. Remember, in order for flames to burn, they have to consume oxygen. Well, the oxygen is so thin in this place where they are at this point, between the niter and the fact that they're underground, that the torches are barely staying lit. At the most remote end of the crypt, there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. That's Paris, I just can't help myself but be dorky, sorry. Of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner, and from the 4th side the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. So what he's saying is we enter this other room, and all around are the skeletons stacked up. And they're like this on this wall, and that wall, and this wall. But on a 4th wall, they've been pulled off that wall, and now they're kind of just like in a big random pile in the middle of the floor, a big heap. Within this wall, thus exposed by the deplacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior crypt or recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width about 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no particular reason within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof in the catacombs, and it was backed by one of the circumscribing walls of solid granite. So what we're seeing now is this is kind of like a little closet area. It's kind of like a little closet. I guess here would be a picture of it. So they're down there in this room, and there's like this little extra closet area, and here are the bones that are kind of just thrown around. So now they're in this area with this extra little closet area. Probably a good place to put some wine. Let's see. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depth of the recess. Its termination, the feeble light, did not enable us to see. So it's so dark in this little closet that Fortunato can't see where it ends. Proceed, I said. Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchese, he is an ignoramus, interrupted my friend as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. In other words, he ran into the wall because he couldn't see, because it was so dark, and he's a bit drunk. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. So he's in this, Fortunato's in this little closet, runs into the walls like, huh? And while he's in kind of a confusion, puke, Montresor fetters him to the wall. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. Pass your hand, I said, over the wall. You cannot help feeling the niter. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you. But I must first render you all the little attentions in my power. The Amontillado? Shouted my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. True, I replied, the Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance to the niche. So here he is, chained to the wall. And here's now Montresor making a brick wall in front of him, like so, with his little trowel. La la la, la la la. I had scarcely laid the first tier of the masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had, in a great measure, worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was the low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I had laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth. Then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. What's that all about? This guy's banging at these chains like a crazy man, and the other guy's like, oh, I think I'll just sit down and take a rest. Listen to those chains. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th tier. The wall was now nearly upon the level of my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the mason work, threw a few feeble lights of ray upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the changed form seemed to thrust me back violently. So my Fortunato starts screaming, "Ah!" And it startles Montresor. He's like, "Ah!" For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess. But the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. So Fortunato, screaming for his life, "Help! Ah!" And at first, Montresor's like, "Oh my God, someone's going to hear him." He pulls out his sword. He's like, I better kill him and make him stop making noise." And then it occurs to him, wait a minute, nobody can hear him. So instead, what does he do? He gets close to him and he screams back at him, even louder. "Ah! You think you're yelling loudly, Fortunato? I'm yelling louder." And then Fortunato stops yelling. Why does he do that, you guys? What does he think? What does he realize? There's no point in yelling. Nobody can hear you. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th, and there remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position, but now there came from out of the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato, and the voice said, "A very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo, over our wine." "The Amontillado," I said. "Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will not they be awaiting us at the palazzo, the Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said, "let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montresor!" "Yes," I said, "for the love of God." But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again, "Fortunato!" No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only the jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick. It was the dampness of the catacombs that made it so. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position, and I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For half a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace, requiescat. In other words, may he rest in peace. So at the end, Fortunato is begging to be let go. "Let's go home. Isn't my wife gonna miss me?" And then he stops asking. He just stops. He's not dead yet. He just stops. Why? That's right. He knows it's pointless. He's not getting out of this, so he just stops fighting. And Montresor puts the last stone in, and it's been half a century. How long is that? 50 years, and he never got caught. So he was able to punish Fortunato with impunity. But the question is, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure Montresor's right in the head. He sounds like a little bit of like there's something going on that isn't right in his head, because seriously, Fortunato insulted him, and so he had to do this to him. Something seriously wrong. This is a great example of a time when a protagonist, the main character in the story, is definitely not the good guy. Definitely not. Okay, time to do some questions.
Okay, so the questions. I looked them over and I feel comfortable with all the questions except for number 8. Number 8 I think is going to be a lot trickier or more open-ended than we're ready for it to be. So I'd like to talk to you about number 8. Number 8 says, name 3 clever ways Montresor lures Fortunato into his trap. Okay, so I think I'm going to just want to give this to you. Oh, just a minute. Okay. All right, so 3 ways. First of all, he tells Fortunato, hey, I've got Amontillado. And does he have Amontillado, by the way? I think some of you might think he really did have a bottle of Amontillado, but guess what? It was a lie. Just a lie to trick Fortunato into wanting to come back to the palazzo. So, number 1, he lies and he tells him that he has a rare bottle of wine, the Amontillado, and he doesn't. Number 2, he tricks him because Fortunato's wits are pretty well shot because Fortunato is drunk. So he's able to lure him by finding him drunk and then keeping him drunk. And finally, the other way he's able to lure him there is with reverse psychology. He keeps pretending to be really concerned about Fortunato's health and saying, no, we need to go back, no, we need to go back. And by continuously saying that, Fortunato feels very safe and is obviously, why wouldn't he feel safe? And so he keeps pushing forward. Okay, those are the 3 reasons I think we should put down. Now the rest of it you ought to be able to do. There will be a quiz on this, and before you go today, you absolutely have to turn in the vocab. That has to be turned in immediately before you go. And if you need to finish the questions, you can finish them at home. But to see the story, you can access the story on your computer or on your phone by going to my Weebly page, nutteranchorbay.weebly.com, and go to the literature page and find the questions for the Cask of Amontillado, or not the questions, but the text for the Cask of Amontillado. Quiz, probably tomorrow, Friday, why not? So let's make sure we have this done. Okay, and turn in those vocab right now. And be nice to the sub. And 4th hour, make sure you put the books away. Okay, I'll see you Friday.